Okay, today we're going to be talking about a few differences between the products, like a 5-inch finish sander that weighs 3 pounds, the Rolabrader that weighs 4.5 pounds, and the belt sander that weighs approximately 5.8 to 10.5 pounds. We'll kind of talk about the differences. Let's start out with the finish sander. The finish sander, a random orbital sander, basically you have a sandpaper pad here and it vibrates. What happens is it tends to break up material on the surface, and then what the material breaks up that on the surface now becomes a barrier to the surface underneath. So the sandpaper is really not able to penetrate anymore because this dust or debris is sitting on top of the surface and it's not being vacuumed up very effectively and kind of floats there. So the tool is not very effective unless you tend to move it around a lot and clean off your the work surface. So it tends to end up floating on top of that dust. So it's not truly very efficient with removing material in timely manner. Now with the Rolabrader, since instead of having a flat surface, we have this round drum. What it tends to do is like a car tire. What it'll do is it'll flick material off the surface. So when it comes around, it picks it up and kind of flicks it up, and it ends up coming out into this exhaust port, and comes out, would be attached to your shop back here. So this tends to be very efficient. So it grabs the material at its source, and it kind of, instead of heating up the surface or causing this debris to settle here, it kind of just picks it up and flicks it off, and then it's collected back in the chamber. Now if we go to the belt sander, this is a very large tool. It's heavy, it's used for long flat surfaces. It has kind of like the similar characteristics of a orbital sander, but it does try to move the dust and debris behind it. And it tends to collect back here, right? So as it does that, but what happens is when you're trying to remove paint or stain or something like that, with the belt sander, and it typically only has, you can only use sandpaper on it. What happens is if you use paint or stain with the belt sander, these belts, they come around and they hit, and they end up collecting all this debris on the surface like the paint, and they get gummed up, and they come back over here, and by the time it's back up here, this is all gummed up. Now this is gummed up. So a couple passes trying to remove paint or stain, and a belt sander gets gummed up really quickly. So as far as consumables, you're eating up a lot of consumables trying to use a belt sander. And a belt sander requires a large area, a large motor, because there's a hard contact surface here, there's a backing plate in here. So now you have this sandpaper that comes around, and this is, you're pushing down and against the material and against the surface. So basically you're trying to sandwich a piece of sandpaper between two flat surfaces. So it requires a lot of torque for the motor, and that's why the tools end up becoming so big and heavy, which is another downfall. Long flat surfaces where it's clean wood and everything like that, and you need to dress it, this would be the way to go. But if you're looking to do something more like cleaning material off a surface, doing it fast and doing it effectively, and being able to do a myriad of different rollers like a Scotch-Brite type, which would be very effective for moving paint and stain, because as it comes around, it kind of flicks this material off the surface, and it doesn't stick in the pores. The Scotch-Brite pad is very porous, so when it comes down through, it kind of falls out. You know what I mean? It not only flicks off, but it actually falls out because there's air pockets in these rollers, and it actually draws air around through and into the surface, so it keeps the surface area cool as it flicks the material off. Now with the orbital sander, once more, you do have a lot of resistance and a lot of buildup here. So you produce a lot of heat, it generates because all the material here is still left on the surface, and you're always trying to move it off, and they have these little vacuums, but they're not very effective, as removing material versus using a whole shop vac to remove the material like a Rolabrader. So those are kind of some of the major differences between the three tools. This is strictly small little sanding. The Rolabrader can be used for all different applications: sanding, buffing, grinding, for steel, for wood, plastic, painted surfaces, stone. Belt sanders, like I said, mainly clean, brand new wood, so it doesn't have some of those issues that it's trying to address. So those are some of the major differences. So check out the Rolabrader online, and stay tuned for more videos.